Pwedeng lapit ng konti yung mukha para ano. Lapit lang ng konti kasi may mga codes kasi baka. So, I'm Karl again, and I'm a programmer here at Clinic IT, and I will be talking about Paloma. Meron na ba sa inyo nakagamit ng Paloma except sa teammates ko? Yeah, ba? Okay. So, baka pagkatapos nito, baka gusto nyo gawin. So, before we talk about Paloma, let's talk a little about the asset pipeline, the Rails asset pipeline. And one of its main features, which is this, it concatenates all JavaScript files into one master.js file. So basically, during the development, we have the freedom to organize our JavaScript into different files and different folders. But ideally, on production, every JavaScript files will be merged into one big application.js, and this application.js will be included in every single page of your application. The main advantage of that approach is that it reduces the number of requests that the browser needs to do in order to render a page. It is important because browser has a limited capacity on how many requests it can make in parallel. So it means that if we have less requests, then you will have a faster page load. So that is a good feature. But there's a little bit of problem with that. So since every JavaScript is merged into one big JS file, then it also means that all JavaScript code will execute in every page. So even if that page, even if that JavaScript code is not really needed on that page, it will still execute. Because of that, since every JavaScript code will execute, there will be a possibility that there will be a variable clash, there will be execution of unnecessary code, which will be an issue, especially for those processes that will take too long to complete. And in our attempt to control the execution of our JavaScript code, we will have these dirty conditional statements just to ensure that only the relevant code will execute in every page. So, what's the solution for that? Just by searching the internet, the web, we can see that Rails developers are looking for something. They are looking for a solution just like this. What's the best way of implementing view page specific JavaScript in Rails 3? Best way to add page specific JavaScript. Where do you put your page specific JavaScript code? Page specific JavaScript, page specific JavaScript, and so on. So we can see that maybe Rails developers just want to have the ability to execute a specific JavaScript code depending on the displayed page. So, for example, you are on the login page. What we want is just the JavaScript for the login page to execute. No other sheets. Just the login page for just the JavaScript for the login page. Or in short, we simply want to have a page-specific JavaScript. But we do not want this. We do not want to selectively include or selectively load JavaScript files. Like, I will just include A.js to page A, B.js to page B, something like that. We don't want that approach. We still want to have the advantage that the Rails asset pipeline have, which is the merging of JS files. So my proposed solution to that is this gem that I created around early 2013, and we have been using it in almost all of our applications here at Clinic IT. And Um, we first used it on Doc, the app earlier. So it is like Rails controller module but for your JavaScript. And its main feature, of course, is it can execute page-specific JavaScript code. It can also make Ruby variables available to JavaScript. So passing data from Rails to JavaScript will be easy. Then it can be written using vanilla JavaScript, plain JavaScript, CoffeeScript, TypeScript, or any superset of JavaScript. And most importantly, it is very easy to understand. If you are a Rails developer, you will find it easy to learn because it is patterned after the Rails controller module. So for the setup, we have the usual add Paloma to your gem file, then run bundle install on your terminal, and on your application.js, you just need to require Paloma, and that's the whole setup. So we'll see. Now we're going to see Paloma in action and some of its advanced features. Here on the Rails side, we have nothing special. Just the usual users controller, then the new action, which is responsible for rendering the new page where we can enter new users. And on the JavaScript side, what we just need to do is to declare a Paloma controller or a JavaScript controller that has the same name as the Rails controller. So for this instance, we have Paloma.controller, then the name of the controller, which is users. Then that method, Paloma.controller, will return a constructor of our controller. And using that constructor, we can add now methods that will correspond to the Rails action. So if we have new here, new action here, then we will also have new function here. So we will do it like users.prototype.new is equal to function. Then everything inside this function is our page-specific JavaScript. So this function will only execute on that page. So let's see. Here's the demo app. If we go to new page, we will see the alert. Because of this, we have alert welcome new user. So we have the alert. And we will also check if the username is present. If the username is blank, we will simply prevent the form submission and raise an error. So if we leave the username blank, the form will not be submitted and there will be the error. So as you can see, since this is page specific, this will only execute on the new page. So in the show page, the alert is not showing up here. On the index page, it is not showing up, and even on the edit page, it will only show up. That JavaScript code will only execute on the new page. So that's the basic idea of Paloma. This is what is happening on the background. So on Rails, Rails will render this page using this controller and this action, users controller new. Then it will also tell Paloma that, hey Paloma, this is the controller and this is the action that initiates the render call. With that, since Paloma already has that information, it will know what JavaScript controller to initialize and what JavaScript controller action will be executed. So this is how the page-specific JavaScript happens. Or in short, this is just like this. If the page is from users controller new, then on the JavaScript side, users new will execute. It's just it. Just the same controller name, same action name. We can also change this default behavior. So by default, this is what Paloma is doing. But we can also change that. For example, on create, again, previously on the new JavaScript, we are just checking if the username is present, but we still need to check if the username is unique. So on the server side, if the application failed to save the user, we will render the new page again, right? We will render the new page again. And because we are rendering the new page again, we want to execute the JavaScript for that page again. But since this is the default behavior of Paloma, it will execute users create on the JavaScript side. But we do not want to execute users create. We want to execute users new. So we're going to override the default behavior of Paloma by calling the helper method JS and passing the symbol, the name of the action in the JavaScript side. So here, instead of users create, users new will be executed on the JavaScript side. So if I created a new user again, but with the same username, it will render the page again and it will execute the new JavaScript code again. So dollar is shown again. There are also other ways of changing the default behavior, overriding the default behavior. You can change the controller to execute on the JavaScript side by passing a string and the name of the controller. Then, just like what we did, we changed the action that will be executed in the JavaScript side by passing a symbol or a string with a pound sign prefix. And you can also change the controller and action like this. Controller, pound sign, and action, and Paloma also handles namespace. So, passing variable, one of the most useful feature of Paloma. You can pass a variable to your JavaScript by, again, using the JS helper method and passing a hash. So here, we're going to pass the username, then its value is this, username. And again, the Paloma controllers are patterned after Rails controllers. So we will access the pass data by using this.params, just like Rails controllers. So we can access this by this.params, then username. So here, what we are doing is that we are tracking the old username so that we can confirm if the user is really sure if he wants to change the username. So this code is for the edit action, for the edit page, users.prototype.edit. So that function is for the edit page. So if I'm going to edit this, there's the confirmation. Are you sure you want to change your username? Okay. That's it. So then you can also change behavior and pass variable at the same time. You can do it just by passing the variables, the hash, the parameters hash, on the last argument of the JS helper method. So here we are changing the default behavior. We want to execute other controller and this action, and we're going to pass this variable, this parameter. The same here. we're going to execute that action on the JavaScript side, and we're going to pass these parameters. Second to the last, prevent execution. For example, you don't want to execute the JavaScript temporarily. You will just need to pass false value on the helper method JS so that it will not be executed. So here, we're going to prevent the new page to execute the JavaScript code. So we're going to use JS false. So now, if I visit the new page, there will be no alert message anymore. There's no alert message anymore. Lastly, controller-wide setup. We will use this if we have the same Paloma setup for all of our actions or for some of our actions. Here we are going to override the default behavior of Paloma. Instead of using the user's controller on the JavaScript side, we're going to use the accounts controller. You can use the controller-wide setup just by calling the JS helper method outside the actions, somewhere at the top of your controller. So if I change this, you can see now that Paloma is looking for the accounts controller, which is undefined. So it is not using the user's controller. And just like our before action on Rails controller, it can also have the only filter and the except filter. So we can use this Paloma setup only for new and edit, or we can pass this parameter except for the action destroy. So that's Paloma. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Karl. So before we close the night, we have an announcement from Topher.